Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. We are so delighted to have you here this afternoon. My name is Amelia Gracia, and I am the president of the Call Club here at ASU. And this is Marlene Tower, and she is the co-president of Call at ASU. So we're here today to welcome you and to introduce you to this amazing presentation by Dr. Jake Green. Marlene, can you tell us a little bit about Dr. Jake Green?
Sure. So his area of research is on digital humanities, right? Visual rhetorics, and he is going to be giving a presentation on the implementation of AI in classrooms, and specifically on a classroom project that he's been working on. So he is going to move through some of the terms up here and discuss writing, rhetoric, and literacy in relation to the use of AI, and discuss specifically the implementation of ChatGPT. So, yes,
fantastic. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Marlene. Yes, so I'm going to be kind of moving in the talk through three terms: writing, rhetoric, and literacy. That's the area in the English department that I teach in. It seemed like the most logical way to kind of organize this talk, honestly. And I'm also going to be kind of peppering in some data from a project that I'm doing in one of my upper level digital rhetoric courses, where students use ChatGPT in one of their writing projects. So I'll kind of be referencing some of that throughout. So if you see like an excerpt of text or anything that's bolded, it's from that kind of very, very preliminary research project that I'm doing on student perceptions of working with AI tools. Perhaps like many of you, I've spent the last few months contemplating the future of my field in the wake of the release of ChatGPT. For anyone unfamiliar, and it sounds like most people are not, ChatGPT is the most widely known iteration of what's been called generative artificial intelligence, which broadly refers to technologies capable of generating original compositions, such as texts, images, data visualizations, based on large sets of training data. Scholars across language-related fields have been hotly debating the implications of generative AI for their own work, as well as the work of professional writers and communicators. So to get my bearings on this technology, the past few months I've been going down rabbit holes of online articles, podcasts, YouTube videos, academic papers, trying to understand this technology and kind of what it means for me. So to not bury the lead here, I'll go ahead right ahead and state my main question guiding this talk. How will AI impact the work of writers moving forward? I don't know. And I don't know if I'm going to have a definitive answer for you by the end of this talk. But I'm going to give it my best shot today. I'm going to focus on each of those three terms, beginning with the term writing. So, before we consider the implications of generative AI on writing, let's first define what writing actually is. To massively simplify long-standing disciplinary debates, I'm just going to boil it down to two definitions of writing that I see as most pertinent to the kind of writing practices that I think generative AI helps us to clarify and think through. On the one hand, we might define writing as an expressive process of reflective self-development and epistemic discovery. In this, writing is both an effort to construct and evidence of a prior motive that extends beyond the compositional task at hand. This is writing an op-ed, to posting a comment on Twitter. And I'm using the term motive here in the sense that the rhetorician Kenneth Burke has defined it as an act of identification toward a particular set of values constructed through language and other symbolic means. Because of this, writing is not only goal-directed or rhetorical in that it seeks to utilize language to initiate change, but it's also constitutive, meaning that the writing process itself affords an identity-constructing mechanism through which writers can better understand themselves and share this identity with others. In short, writing allows us to better define, by providing a language for, our sense of identity within a world of discourse and symbols. Any composition scholars in the audience might recognize elements of expressivism in this definition. Expressivism is a movement within composition theory that emerged within kind of the wider process movement, but with a more specific focus on teaching writing as a self-directed, personal activity through which writers create, manipulate, share, and express their own rhetorical goals, and in turn construct a sense of their own writerly identity. We see expressivism present in various ways in writing pedagogy, through things like free writing or reflection essays, and many of you may have even incorporated these things into your classes. However, these kind of elements of expressivism have in many ways kind of given way to more genre-based approaches to teaching writing, things like academic, professional genres of writing. And this is where my second definition of writing comes into play. We also view writing as a representational act, focused on efficiently producing texts that are most likely to achieve an intended communicative goal. Generative AI seems much better at this second definition, particularly in writing tasks that have a fairly established genre conventions, things like quarterly reports, 5-paragraph essays, things like that. However, these two definitions are not mutually exclusive. However, in the years to come, I think generative AI may further complicate this implied boundary between two very different ways that we value, teach, and discuss writing. For example, I like to think through examples when I'm thinking about new tech. Imagine you're writing a cover letter for a teaching job that emphasized your past experience as a camp counselor. This is a relatively common writing task, and one that certainly allows for creative expression of ideas, but is perhaps more often considered through the lens of the second definition of writing, because it has a clearly intended communicative purpose and is written in a fairly established genre of professional discourse, the cover letter. A generative AI system would most likely be quite adept at producing quality output that abides by the established genre conventions of the cover letter, while simultaneously highlighting relevant employment experiences from your past, assuming it had access to maybe the basic data of that experience. And moving forward, it's likely that writers will come to further rely on generative AI systems for producing professional materials like cover letters. But what do writers miss out on when they offload this compositional task to AI? Maybe in some cases, not much. Perhaps human-written cover letters will become a relic of our compositional past. As someone who's taught professional writing in the past, I think this would be unfortunate, because if others maybe who have also taught similar courses know, the process of drafting and revising something like a cover letter is vital not only for its functional qualities, but also for the constitutive expressive function as for crafting a sense of professional identity out of your own life experiences. As such, writing teachers may have more work to do to demonstrate that writing is a two-way street. It's not only a skill through which we're able to represent ourselves through symbolic means, but also a way that we can participate in the very construction of this identity. So, moving on to my second term for my area, rhetorics. A common approach to thinking about the rhetorical effects of emerging technology is to view it through the lens of the 5 canons of rhetoric: invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. And this is the approach I'm going to take in this next section. In this process, this is where I'm going to reference some of the student reflection responses from the assignment where I asked them to use ChatGPT in composing the essay. The assignment was relatively straightforward and simple, relatively low stakes assignment, and I didn't give them a ton of guidelines or limitations on how they could use ChatGPT within the assignment. They could use pretty much as much or as little as they wanted to. All I asked and required is that they were honest in their reflection essay in terms of their use of ChatGPT. And I think doing it in that more low stakes environment, I got some more, I can't really verify for sure, but somewhat genuine, authentic responses to how they're thinking about, this technology in their own writing lives. So beginning with invention. So invention in rhetorical studies simply refers to the ability to generate and select the appropriate content or ideas within a given rhetorical act. In this case, writing an essay for a class. Strategies often include things like brainstorming, talking to others, free writing, In generative AI, I think, in the context of this assignment that I did, has already shown to be highly useful during the stage of rhetorical production. And as many of you may have seen, examples of YouTube videos and TikToks of people using ChatGPT for similar kind of inventional purposes. This was probably the main area, in thinking about the canons, that students most noted the potential usefulness of AI. And I wanted to highlight one particular reflection that I thought demonstrated some of those ideas. So this student writes, to begin with, I had no idea what I wanted to write about, but throughout the class period where we were allowed to speak about potential ideas for this paper, we were allowed to use ChatGPT as a writing tool, I eventually came up with my topic. I was thinking about doom scrolling and social media addiction. Doom scrolling led to the negative and damaging effects of social media on a specific individual. I also asked ChatGPT to create a list of the negative effects of social media, which led to the terms polarization and tribalization. These terms led to explanation of confirmation bias and limited perspectives surrounding certain beliefs and discourses within the public's interactions with social media. As this student reflection demonstrates, generative AI can work in a kind of dialogic manner with the student, and there's some other examples where students are kind of using it more to kind of generate some different ideas. But I think this one's telling, definitely in the way that the student did come to kind of rely on AI a lot more in generating topic ideas, maybe than they would have if they were doing research in the library or something like that. But a lot of them did note, I think, in the invention stage, how useful it was to have something like an AI system and helping them think through what are maybe some of the key terms that they might use to structure an essay or build into further sites of analysis. Although students found the brainstorming aspects of ChatGPT impressive, they definitely noticed limitations in its ability to coherently integrate these ideas into an original piece of writing. And as a caveat, this was an upper level English class, English 472. So the body of data I'm drawing from is from students who do want to become professional writers in some capacity or already consider themselves, somewhat advanced writers. So that could be telling in regard to how something like AI plays out in these different stages of writing. A lot of them were not super impressed with the style of writing that it generated. They noted that the connections made in particular between sentences, paragraphs, and sections were often superficial or mostly just robotic and bland. And I think one student reflection, this one really helps to capture this perceived limitation when they talk about it through the metaphor of trying to put together a puzzle. She writes, I heavily relied on editing ChatGPT's pieces of evidence to fit into the analysis I was composing. It felt as if I was putting together a puzzle of some sort. I was responsible with setting the frame and arranging the pieces in the middle, but the puzzle pieces were proven incomplete. Thus, I constructed pieces of my own to match with the ones already given. Then, I had to make sure the color scheme was similar across all pieces. My handmade puzzles tended to be more colorful than the original set, so I tried to brighten the initial pieces and tone down the latter ones. It was interesting to interact with this process because I realized what AI could provide is an excellent descriptive account, not an intelligent, complex, persuasive argument. So there's really this problem, I think, that more advanced writers at least are noting with the inability of the system to create a lot of cohesion within the text that it's outputting. But as I'll get to later, I don't know how much of this is telling for the limitations of ChatGPT or AI, or how much of it's telling of the limitations of the writer's ability to generate prompts to get the kind of output that they want. And I'll get to that in a little bit. Because this was on ChatGPT, which I think was when we did this project, GPT-4 hadn't yet come out yet, so that's where all of this is coming from. Stylistically, students were also unanimous in their assessment of ChatGPT as producing mostly bland, robotic writing that's often repetitive. This also coincided with description of the ChatGPT as producing writing that was professional and informative. I think this is partly because I asked them to compose an essay for this assignment, which many of them took to be a more argumentative or opinion-driven genre. And ChatGPT, obviously, kind of more oriented to more informative styles of writing, descriptive. So I think they were trying to wrangle the output they were getting from ChatGPT into the genre that they were used to in schools that are usually more thesis-driven for an argument. And many of them noted how it was hard to kind of see their own voice or style in their writing by using this system. The AI tool certainly affected my voice. There were times when it was noticeable that the paper was written by two different entities. Much of the AI syntax was very robotic with different sentence structure than my own writing, negatively affecting the rhythm of my essay. Nevertheless, I reached a point where I just accepted that parts of my essay will appear to have mixed writing styles simply as a consequence of receiving outside help. And another student wrote, I noticed it was very redundant. It reminded me of a high schooler trying to meet the required word count. This resulted in me picking only a sentence or two from the large bodies of text it gave me. I did not necessarily play the role of an editor. Rather, I was looking for the diamond in the rough that was worthy of adding to my paper. So obviously stylistic considerations are very subjective. There were some kind of general, kind of overall patterns I was noticing though in students' critique of the types of writing that it was outputting as lacking creativity, lacking cohesion, and also kind of like creating a tension between their sense of writing as kind of having a unique voice. So going back to that original idea of writing as expressive in some way, they're seeing these AI systems as kind of impinging on that expressive ability. So memory was a tricky one to kind of think about here. It's not something that students reflect on. But I did notice there were different parts where there was kind of an intuitive sense of the way that the memory that the student writer was working with generative AI began to come up in the reflections, but also their own kind of, you could see their perceptions of AI's memory itself and how it was affecting the kind of writing that it was doing. And mostly they saw the AI-generated text as a kind of synthesizer of information found elsewhere online, which makes sense considering the primary digital literacies have been developed through things like search engines and database-style queries with things like Google or library databases. So they intuitively constructed a sense of memory for ChatGPT itself, frequently using terms like pulling or grabbing information when describing the output text. So they definitely, I think, almost viewed it similar to the way that we think of like Google as crawling across the web, finding articles. There's a similar conception, I think, for students in viewing the memory capacities of AI in a similar way, even though it's using and analyzing language very differently than a system like a search engine. And the first one wrote, it seemed very robotic, as if it were just reading something off compared to showing you may be knowledgeable on the topic being discussed. And then another student, I think it was interesting, noted how using something like ChatGPT could potentially allow them to offload some of the cognitive demands of the writing process, theoretically freeing up space for deeper analytical thinking. Instead of using it as a brainstorming or planning tool, I found asking the AI to summarize specific areas of discussion within my essay to be most helpful. This lower level thinking certainly would not be very hard to produce on my own, but it allotted me more time to construct deeper analysis. So it's another conception, I think, of the way these systems could affect how writers come to think of different parts of the writing process, particularly in this case, summarizing, things like he also writes about defining certain key terms. You could offload that to ChatGPT, which is interesting to kind of place those in a hierarchy of those things not being deep analysis. I think the definitional work, summarizing work, that can also be deep analytical work that a writer engages in. So it's interesting how those things play out in the composing of an essay. Just kind of interesting way of conceptualizing memory that the student has. So the last one for delivery. So although students did not address questions of delivery explicitly in their reflections, several considered the implications of generative AI for beyond the class and in their future writing lives. In particular, many seem to note the sense of losing themselves by ceding so much control of the writing process to ChatGPT. In one striking example, a student described the murky ethical stance toward the output text and wondered if it could really claim to be their writing. I did feel a slight sense of guilt in using the tool. I felt that I should not have been using it, especially for a purpose such as writing an essay. I felt as if I would somehow get caught cheating and ultimately punished for using it, even though the purpose of this assignment was to do just that. I believe that as a result of feeling this way, I don't think I will necessarily use it again in the future in this exact same way. I think that I would again feel too much guilt compiled with a strong fear of getting caught. Concerns of getting caught speak directly to the punitive nature through which writing is often assessed in classroom contexts. But it also addresses the question of delivery more broadly, in the sense that, as of now at least, we don't have defined protocols for identifying AI-generated text or for allotting the rhetorical labor involved in AI-assisted writing processes, which is one of the reasons I've been reluctant to use something like ChatGPT in my own work, in writing things like reference letters or things like that. There's really not agreed upon, I think, societal or industry standards for who is actually the author of the text when you're using AI assistance in the process. And some of that might happen as a result of explicit protocols. Some of it could happen culturally, like when we send an email and we use like the additional couple extra words that Microsoft Outlook recommends in a sentence we're typing, like "have a nice day." We don't usually typically think of that as plagiarizing or cheating, or we might get caught that somebody thought we used AI-generated text in an email. But that kind of cultural evolution, people know that that's kind of okay to do. But I think this student's reflection is telling, and their sense of I think struggling to lose that sense of their own writing is always this kind of active expression that represents yourself in some way. So to wrap up the rhetoric section, clearly generative AI will be profoundly disruptive to each of the traditional canons of rhetoric. But rather than viewing AI tools as a nuisance that must be policed in the writing classroom, I think we should instead focus on their implementation and their implications across these 5 domains, and invite our students into critical conversations about the effects of such tools on different aspects of rhetorical